Hutton, welcome to the show, man. Appreciate your time. And we'll talk about free agency and we'll talk about team needs in the offseason for this Titans team as we get that part of the season started. But I do want to ask, because I'm contractually obligated to ask you about Ryan Tannehill. Um, my question, though, is probably a little different from what everybody else is asking. And I know you've talked about this on your show, but I'm just like, what is the right question that we should be asking about Ryan Tannehill and his future with the Tennessee Titans? Like, what is the right thing we should be asking?
Well, Braden, I think it comes down to the question of, is he the guy to get you to a championship? That's the question that we were posing about Mariota and every quarterback. And every market's doing this with their quarterback situation. And a year ago at this time, we would have said absolutely, 100%, based on the numbers that the offense put up and how bad the defense was. Now the focus is solely on Tannehill, paired with Todd Downing as play caller, and based on what we've seen the last couple of seasons in the playoffs. And I think the question's valid. I don't think we're reading too much into one game or over analyzing one playoff game. Look at the postseason numbers compared to the regular season numbers, and it's not just the last 2 years, but even in the 2019 championship run, AFC championship run, it was Henry on a tear. And while Tannehill stepped up and made some key throws and some big ones, he played well. It was 18 to 21 pass attempts per game. And then last year against the Ravens, when you needed him most, he wasn't that good. And this past season, as they bow out of the postseason to Cincinnati, again, 3 interceptions, and some of it can be play call and play design, but ultimately it's about the quarterback. And if the quarterback's going to step up and make that key throw in the biggest moments. And I've said before, and I continue to look at it, in the biggest moments in the regular season, Tannehill's really good. In the biggest moments of the postseason, he's played small. And it's tough to argue against that if you're looking at it, with no dog in the fight here. And again, I think he's been a good quarterback. I think he is a good quarterback. But if we're asking the question, can he lead you to a title? I think that's a valid question and an argument to be had behind closed doors. And I think they're doing it, although I don't think he's going anywhere.
No, I don't think so either. That's my follow-up. If Robinson sits alone, Jon Robinson sits alone in his office by himself late at night, sipping bourbon, and he's looking at film and he's going, all right, the answer to your question that you just posed, Jonathan, is no. What are his options now moving forward? I know they can get out of the contract in 2023, but what is the right approach?
Well, he's sipping his bullet, right? And he's thinking, well, what happened at tight end? Jonnu Smith was a very good option for Tannehill that they did not replace in any capacity. And he's also pointing to the injuries. And while I think you can look at the injuries and all the players that they went through this season, including the best player with Derrick Henry, I think you have to figure out, how do we make the best player Ryan Tannehill when Henry's not churning the way he was at portions of the regular season? Example would be if he's playing the way he played against the Cincinnati Bengals. You have to put more players around him than just A.J. Brown. I mean, and that's easier said than done, especially whenever that also includes the offensive line.
So with that in mind, Ben Jones, free agent, you got some of the big defensive pieces, Harold Landry, Jayon Brown, Rashaan Evans. I think a lot of fans have have very specific ideas on a lot of those players, but what should the Titans be doing with some of their pending free agents?
To me, it starts with Harold Landry. I think a franchise tag is headed his way the same way that they used it on Derrick Henry, where ultimately they just used the tag as an extension for negotiations and they got a deal done before the season. So I look at Landry in that same category, because if you bring him back, you can get to the quarterback with 4. And I think that's crucial for this defense. And that's a big reason why they catapulted up from where they were a year ago. So that's number one. The second layer to it, and maybe it's just 1A, 1B, is the offensive line. It starts on the left side with Lewan and Saffold. If you were asking me who's back, I don't know which one's back, but I think one of them, more importantly, is gone due to cap constraints and the money they can save this year on both guys. The reason why I don't think you can just overhaul the left side right now is they have swung and missed at right tackle. I don't think you can go into another season thinking that David Quesenberry, while a good backup, is a starting right tackle for you week one again. To me, that's not the right plan. And they haven't addressed that. Well, they've tried to address it. They haven't addressed it well at all in the draft recently. So can you afford to replace? Now we're talking 3. And then Ben Jones at center. I just don't think you can overhaul the entire offensive line. Jones, to me, is a big piece of their entire puzzle. And while he's as tough as nails and plays through it, lingering behind the scenes, you have to be thinking Ben Jones and Roger Saffold, are they starting to decline based on injuries? Can we count on them week in, week out based on injuries? They're playing through it. I think they represent the mentality of the team, quite frankly. And I think that's important. And then you have to weigh what's going on with Lewan and the money that he's owed, the money you can save on the cap by releasing him, and considering, how many games he's played or not played over the last 2.5 seasons. I think all of that's valid. And that's the toughest part of this, is putting the puzzle together, because with Lewan, you're getting a guy who is not bowing out of games, but is banged up quite a bit, but not as much as Saffold or Ben Jones leave for series to go with the shoulder or just, nicks and bruises and everything else. It's very interesting how they go about it, Braden, because I don't know if there's an exact right answer to it. I just don't think you can bring everyone back. I think you have to have a rebuilding plan there. And then it starts at tight end. Right now, they don't have a tight end under contract for 2022. So I think you can address that in multiple ways, draft and free agency. But to me, it starts up front on the offense and up front on the defense, primarily with Landry, and then going and sticking with the plan of, here's the veterans on the line we're going to keep, and here's why. And here's the money we're going to save by releasing some other options.
So it's a really good roster. It's a really good team. And Titans fans are going to hear, well, we're going to go into the draft with offensive line as a priority. That sounds terrifying probably for most Tennessee Titans fans to go into the draft that way. I agree, tight end and depth at playmaker. If you want to include running back and receiver in that conversation, that's fine. What are the top positions of need? It sounds like you're saying tight end and offensive line writ large.
Well, and then a true number 3 wideout. And, I would assume they're going to say, well, we've got some options for that position, but they're all banged up and they didn't finish the season, or they got hurt relatively early on. And that's fine. But when you look at the Bengals, they can run it efficiently early in the year. They were running it efficiently with Joe Mixon. And then they transitioned into more of this offense goes through Joe Burrow and it goes through the playmakers. And they've got a true number 1 in A.J. Brown. Julio Jones is a number 2 for half of a game whenever he actually plays. But you can't to me, you have to find a third option that can step up and be a number 2 receiver. I don't think they have that guy right now. They've got number 3s, but not a number 2, like a legitimate guy that is going to give you 40 to 50 yards a game. I don't think you go into the season with the group that they have, or the group they finish with, for sure. So it's a priority for me, and I would look in the draft for that position because the Bengals are a nice example of it. They've got 3 guys who are producing at a very high level. Boyd as a number 3 that's 50 catches, 800 yards. That's a number 3 receiver in the league. And that's the type of example I'm giving. If Henry goes down, if Henry's, if the defense stops him the way that we have seen Kansas City and Baltimore and Cincinnati do in the postseason against Henry, you got to have the ability to elevate in the passing game. The Titans haven't had that. And to me, that's got to be a priority. Tight end, though, the intermediate routes and the throws over the middle on play action, that was where I thought they really missed out this year with Jonnu not being there. And you can point to what he didn't do in New England. I'm just saying I know what he did here in Nashville. He meant a lot to that offense, and they did not replace it, didn't come close to it, not even flashes of replacing Jonnu Smith. I think they have to find a very versatile passing threat, but also a guy that they're able to keep in there for 2 tight ends when they want to run the football.
Well, the good news is for Titans fans that receiver, interior offensive line, and tight end are generally pretty easily acquirable pieces in rounds 2 through 6. Robinson has been good there, but of course that leaves him drafting an offensive tackle in the first round, and we know how that goes. Hutton, always a pleasure, man. OutKick 360 every single weekday. We appreciate it, man. Enjoy your trip to the Super Bowl. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, Braden. Good to talk with you, man.